The lakeside mall buzzed with the familiar chaos of weekend shopping. Families pushing strollers laden with bags navigated around. Teenagers huddled by the food court, all beneath the constant white noise of 1,000 conversations blending under the sprawling glass ceiling. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the skylights, casting warm patches across the polished tile floors as shoppers wove between brightly lit storefronts, displaying the season's latest offerings. Claire Morgan moved through the Saturday crowd with practiced efficiency, her steps deliberate and measured. At her side walked Beacon, a 3-year-old Belgian Malinois, wearing a professional blue service vest with medical alert patches clearly visible on both sides. Unlike the rushed shoppers who bumped shoulders and dodged around each other, Beacon moved with military precision, maintaining perfect heel position. Despite the chaos, his attentive amber eyes occasionally glancing up at Claire's face to check her status. "Excuse us, please," Claire murmured as they navigated past a group of teenagers who had stopped abruptly to take selfies in front of a clothing display. She kept her right hand loosely on Beacon's specialized mobility harness, not because she needed the physical support today, but because the connection grounded her amid the sensory overload of the mall environment. The holiday decorations had already appeared, though Thanksgiving was still 2 weeks away. Giant silver and red ornaments hung from the ceiling, and synthetic pine garlands draped the railings of the second-floor walkways. A distant piano rendition of Winter Wonderland competed with the cacophony of the crowd, barely audible above the din of conversations, squeaking stroller wheels, and the occasional announcement over the mall's PA system. Claire checked her watch. 2:17 p.m. She had planned this trip carefully, arriving after the lunch rush, but before the evening crowd descended, her mental checklist was nearly complete. New running shoes, the birthday gift for her niece, and just one more stop at the bookstore to pick up the novel her book club was reading next. Then she could return to the quiet sanctuary of her apartment before the familiar tension in her shoulders evolved into a full-blown anxiety attack. Beacon remained steady beside her, his training evident in every controlled movement. Unlike pet dogs who might sniff at dropped food or strain toward interesting scents, he remained focused solely on Claire and potential threats to her well-being. When a toddler suddenly screamed at a nearby toy store, Beacon immediately checked Claire's reaction, ready to provide deep pressure therapy if the sound triggered her. But today was a good day. Claire merely flinched, then continued walking with a deep breath. The central court of the mall opened before them, a circular area with a decorative fountain surrounded by benches where tired shoppers rested their feet. Claire steered them toward the less crowded path along the outer edge, avoiding the dense cluster of people gathered around a weekend product demonstration. Beacon adjusted his pace, perfectly navigating the space as if he and Claire were a single entity moving through the crowd. Their coordination was the result of thousands of hours together through training sessions, therapy appointments, and the daily challenges of Claire's post-military life. Claire hadn't always needed Beacon at her side. 5 years ago, she had been Captain Claire Morgan, a trauma nurse with the Army Medical Corps, known for staying impossibly calm during the worst mass casualty situations. She'd treated wounded soldiers under fire, stabilized blast injuries in helicopters, and once performed an emergency airway procedure during a sandstorm with almost zero visibility. Her commanding officers had called her unshakable. Then came the mortar attack on the forward operating base outside Mosul. Claire had been the senior medical officer on duty in the field hospital when the shells hit. She'd worked for 17 hours straight, saving 13 lives while the base remained under sporadic fire. She'd kept working even after learning that the third mortar had killed 4 soldiers, including her younger brother Ryan, who had followed her into military service against their parents' wishes. The aftermath had been devastating traumatic brain injury from being thrown against a wall during a close explosion, shrapnel wounds to her left leg, and the invisible wounds of PTSD that ultimately proved more debilitating than her physical injuries. Her medical discharge had come 6 months later, following 3 surgeries, and the realization that her hands, once steady enough to tie sutures under artillery fire, now shook uncontrollably during panic attacks that came without warning. Civilian life had become a minefield of triggers, crowds, sudden noises, certain smells that transported her instantly back to the worst moments of her service. She'd tried therapy, medication, support groups, nothing fully worked until the VA's service dog program matched her with Beacon 2 years ago. Beacon wasn't just any service dog. The Belgian Malinois had washed out of a military working dog program, not for lack of ability, but for being too gentle and too attuned to human emotion attributes that made him perfect for medical alert work. His specialized training included detecting the subtle biochemical changes preceding Claire's panic attacks and seizures, a complication from her TBI that occurred rarely but dangerously. "He's reading your body chemistry," the trainer had explained during their placement. "Changes in your breath, microscopic perspiration, even shifts in your gait that you won't notice consciously. Beacon will alert before you even know something's wrong." Their connection had grown beyond the parameters of training. Beacon had an uncanny ability to assess threats in Claire's environment, distinguishing between harmless stressors and genuine dangers. He would place his body between Claire and anything that might trigger her, whether approaching strangers or unexpected movements, while remaining practically invisible during normal interactions. Most importantly, Beacon had given Claire back her independence. Before him, she'd barely left her apartment, missing medical appointments and isolating from friends and family. Now she volunteered twice weekly at the VA hospital, had resumed her education in nursing, and could navigate public spaces like this mall, still difficult but manageable with Beacon's steady presence and alerting skills. What most people didn't understand when they saw Claire and Beacon was that beneath his calm, professional exterior was a dog who could detect microscopic chemical changes imperceptible to any human sense or medical device. His alerting behavior wasn't just good training, it was a sophisticated biological detection system paired with unwavering devotion. Claire guided Beacon toward the central court fountain, planning to cut across to reach the bookstore on the opposite side. They were passing a row of benches near the fountain when Beacon's demeanor changed. His ears pricked forward, head lifting slightly higher, his gait losing its fluid rhythm for just a step. Claire noticed immediately. After 2 years together, the slightest changes in Beacon's behavior registered like alarm bells. "What is it, buddy?" she murmured, scanning the area for potential triggers. Nothing in their immediate vicinity seemed threatening. No loud noises, no rapidly approaching strangers. None of the usual triggers for her anxiety. Beacon's attention had fixed on something ahead, and to their right, Claire followed his gaze to a navy blue stroller, parked beside a bench where a woman in her 30s, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun, was sorting through shopping bags. The baby in the stroller appeared to be sleeping peacefully under a light blanket, decorated with cartoon giraffes. Claire gently tugged Beacon's harness to redirect him. "Come on, focus, leave it!" Instead of responding to her command, something he had been trained to do regardless of distraction, Beacon's posture stiffened further. A low whine escaped his throat, a sound Claire had rarely heard from her perfectly trained service dog. Beacon took a step toward the stroller, breaking his heel position for the first time in public that Claire could remember. "Make a cue, Beacon heel." Claire commanded more firmly, embarrassment warming her cheeks as a passing elderly couple glanced their way. Service dogs were supposed to be invisible in public. That was the standard. Beacon had never broken protocol like this before. The dog complied reluctantly, returning to her side, but keeping his gaze locked on the stroller. 3 more steps and Beacon halted, completely planting his feet and refusing to move away from the stroller's direction. "Is something wrong with your dog?" the mother asked, noticing Beacon's focused attention. Her tone held a hint of annoyance as she glanced between her shopping bags and the service dog. She was dressed in fashionable yoga pants and an oversized sweater, designer sunglasses perched on top of her head, the image of a polished suburban mother. "I'm sorry, he's..." Claire began, but Beacon cut her apology short with a sharp, authoritative bark that echoed across the central court. Shoppers turned toward the sound, expressions ranging from curious to disapproving. A service dog barking in public was unusual enough to draw attention from across the busy space. "Control your dog, please," the mother said more firmly, her irritation now evident as she began gathering her shopping bags. "You're frightening my baby." But the baby hadn't stirred at the loud bark, something Claire's medical training immediately flagged as unusual. Most sleeping infants would startle at such a sound. Beacon barked again, then again, each bark growing more insistent. This wasn't aggression. Claire knew all of Beacon's behaviors intimately. This was an alert. The same pattern he used when detecting an impending medical emergency for Claire. "Ma'am, I think..." Claire started, but the mother cut her off. "Service dogs aren't supposed to bark in public." The woman snapped, standing up and moving protectively toward her stroller. "You need to leave now." Two mall security guards in navy blue uniforms approached, drawn by the commotion. The taller one, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a name tag reading Powell, addressed Claire directly. "Ma'am, we've had complaints about your dog disrupting shoppers. Is everything all right?" Beacon continued barking, straining toward the stroller. With uncharacteristic intensity, Claire felt dozens of eyes on her, assuming she couldn't control her service dog. The pressure to apologize and leave was overwhelming, triggering the beginning sensations of an anxiety attack. The quickening heartbeat, the tightening chest, the growing sense that everyone was staring. But Beacon's behavior told a different story, one that years of partnership had taught her to trust. She focused on her breathing, the techniques her therapist had taught her, and found her voice. "My service dog is medically trained," Claire explained, struggling to keep her voice steady. "He's specifically alerting to something concerning that baby. This isn't normal behavior for him. In 2 years, he's never done this without good reason." The second security guard, a younger woman with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and a name tag reading Reyes, stepped closer to the mother. "Ma'am, would you mind checking on your child just to be safe?" "Oh, this is ridiculous," the mother protested, crossing her arms defensively. "She's fine, just taking her afternoon nap. I've been shopping for less than an hour." Powell frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ma'am," he addressed Claire, "service animals aren't supposed to be disruptive in public spaces. Mall policy requires that they remain under control at all times." "Kyo, I understand mall policy." Claire interrupted, her military training coming through in her voice. "But Beacon doesn't alert like this without reason. He's detecting something medically serious." Beacon had now entered his full medical alert posture, sitting rigidly, barking in the distinct 3-bark pattern, then pawing at the ground. It was the same sequence he used when detecting Claire's rare seizures, before they happened, a behavior that had saved her from serious injury multiple times. "Oh, look." Claire continued, drawing on her medical background. "I was a trauma nurse in the Army. Beacon is trained to detect certain medical emergencies. Something is wrong with that baby, and every second we stand here arguing could matter." A small crowd had gathered, murmuring among themselves. An older woman stepped forward, her silver hair styled in an elegant bob that framed a face lined with concern. "Maybe you should check the baby, dear," she suggested to the mother. "Better safe than sorry." The mother's confidence wavered slightly as she glanced at her still motionless child. "She's just a heavy sleeper," she insisted, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Your baby hasn't moved at all despite the noise," Claire pointed out quietly. Not even a startled response to Beacon's barking. That's not normal for an infant. The mother's expression shifted as this observation registered. She turned toward the stroller, tension visible in her shoulders. "Please," Claire said, her voice softening. "Beacon has never been wrong about a medical alert. Never once in 2 years I wouldn't insist if I wasn't concerned for your daughter." The security guards exchanged glances, clearly unsure of protocol for this unusual situation. Powell stepped closer to the stroller. "Ma'am, would you mind if we just take a quick look? Then everyone can go about their day." The mother hesitated, then finally nodded, stepping toward the stroller. "Fine, I'll show you that she's just sleeping, and then I expect an apology." Claire stayed back, keeping Beacon steady as the mother leaned over the stroller and gently pulled back the giraffe-patterned blanket. The woman's irritated expression suddenly transformed her face, draining of color. "Lily," she said, her voice rising, When the infant didn't respond, she touched her daughter's cheek. "Lily, wake up, baby!" The security guards moved forward immediately as the mother's voice escalated to panic. "She's not waking up," she cried frantically, unbuckling the stroller straps with trembling fingers. "Help, something's wrong with my baby." Powell immediately radioed for medical assistance, while Reyes helped the mother lift the unresponsive infant from the stroller. The baby's lips had a slightly bluish tinge, and though her chest moved with shallow breaths, she remained completely unresponsive to her mother's increasingly desperate attempts to wake her. "I'm a registered nurse," Claire said, stepping forward with calm authority. "May I help while we wait for medical personnel?" The mother nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face as Claire approached. Beacon remained perfectly behaved now, his urgent alerting replaced with attentive monitoring. His job detecting the emergency was complete. Claire checked the baby's vital signs with practiced efficiency. She's breathing, but it's shallow. Pulse is present, but slow. She looked at the mother. "Has Lily been ill recently? Any medical conditions?" "No, nothing," the mother stammered, clinging to her daughter's tiny hand. "She had a routine checkup last week. Everything was perfect. She just fell asleep during shopping." An older man stepped forward from the gathered crowd. "I'm Dr. Ellis, pediatrician. May I examine her?" With the mother's permission, the doctor quickly assessed the infant. "Pupils are responsive but sluggish," he noted. "Temperature seems normal." He looked at Claire and lowered his voice. "This looks neurological. How long has she been unresponsive?" "I don't know," the mother sobbed. "She fell asleep maybe 40 minutes ago. She's usually a heavy sleeper during shopping trips." The motion of the stroller. Her voice broke as the reality hit her. "Oh God, has she been like this the whole time? I thought she was just sleeping." Mall medical personnel arrived with a first aid kit and oxygen. Moments later, paramedics pushed through the crowd with a gurney and pediatric medical equipment. Service dog alerted to the baby. Dr. Ellis explained to the paramedics, "Infant is unresponsive, but breathing possible neurological event." As the paramedics began their assessment, the lead EMT glanced at Beacon. "Belgian Malinois medical alert dog. Right, they're amazing scent detectors. We had one alert to a carbon monoxide victim who showed no visible symptoms last year, saved an entire family. Their olfactory capabilities are extraordinary." Dr. Ellis added, watching Beacon with newfound respect. "Some studies suggest they can detect molecular changes at concentrations of parts per trillion. That's like finding a drop of blood in 20 Olympic swimming pools." The medical applications are still being discovered, particularly for conditions where early detection dramatically improves outcomes. The lead paramedic nodded as he attached a pulse oximeter to Lily's tiny finger. "I've seen dogs detect seizures before a clinical onset, identify malignancies, before scans could even predict cardiac events. This little one is fortunate that you and your partner were here today." The mother, who had introduced herself as Vanessa Collins, clutched her daughter's small hand. "Your dog knew," she whispered, looking at Claire with tear-filled eyes. "How could he possibly know when I didn't? I'm her mother." The paramedics worked with swift efficiency, securing the infant to the pediatric backboard and attaching monitoring equipment. "Oxygen saturation is lower than I'd like," the lead paramedic noted, placing a tiny oxygen mask over Lily's face. "And these readings suggest possible seizure activity, though not convulsive. We're looking at what might be absent seizures or a post-ictal state." "What does that mean? Will she be okay?" Vanessa asked her earlier, defensiveness completely replaced by maternal terror. "We need to get her to Memorial Children's Hospital for proper diagnosis," the paramedic explained. "But the good news is we're catching this early before any oxygen deprivation could cause permanent damage." A female paramedic was checking Lily's vital signs again when she paused, leaning closer to examine something. "Ms. Collins, has Lily been prescribed any medications recently?" "No, nothing," Vanessa responded. "She's never been on medication." The paramedic pointed to barely visible marks on the inside of Lily's elbow. "These look like injection sites, but very small, the kind we see with certain medical tests. The only needle she's had was for routine vaccinations at her checkup last week." Vanessa explained, confusion evident in her voice. as she peered at the marks. Dr. Ellis examined the marks and frowned. These are more recent than a week ago, and they're not consistent with standard vaccination injections. Beacon suddenly returned to alert posture, looking intently at the diaper bag hanging from the stroller handle. Claire recognized this specific behavior. Beacon had detected something relevant. "Ma'am," Claire said carefully, "would you mind if we check Lily's diaper bag? Beacon is alerting to something there." Vanessa nodded immediately. All earlier skepticism vanished. "Of course, anything that might help." Security Officer Powell retrieved the bag, and Claire guided Beacon through a careful sniff investigation. The dog immediately indicated a side pocket, repeatedly touching it with his nose in the pattern he used for detecting substances. Inside the pocket, they found a small medicine bottle labeled as infant acetaminophen, but the security seal was broken and it was only half full. "I didn't put that there," Vanessa said, her face paling further. "That's not our brand, and Lily hasn't needed any pain medication." The lead paramedic carefully secured the bottle in an evidence bag. "We'll have this analyzed at the hospital. It's possible it contains something else or has been tampered with." The second paramedic called urgently. "Her O2 is dropping. We need to move now." As they prepared to transport Lily, Beacon whined softly and placed his head against Claire's leg. His way of communicating that his job was done. He had detected whatever was wrong long before humans could see the symptoms, potentially saving the child from a much worse outcome. "Your dog is extraordinary," Dr. Ellis told Claire as the paramedics began moving the gurney. "I've practiced pediatrics for 30 years, and I couldn't see any signs of distress just looking at that child." Yet he knew immediately. Vanessa, walking alongside the gurney, turned back to Claire. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." "If you hadn't insisted," she couldn't finish the sentence. "Thank Beacon," Claire replied softly. "He's the hero here." The paramedics disappeared through the mall exit with Lily and Vanessa, leaving behind a crowd of stunned shoppers and a stroller that was now being treated as a potential crime scene. The Central Court had transformed into an impromptu command center. Police officers had arrived shortly after Lily was transported, cordoning off the area around the stroller and diaper bag. The bottle from the diaper bag was now evidence in what the lead detective called a potential case of deliberate drugging. Beacon sat calmly at Claire's side as she gave her statement to Detective Sofia Rivera, a stern-faced woman with compassionate eyes who recorded every detail of Beacon's alerting behavior with surprising interest. "So your dog detected something wrong with the child before any visible symptoms appeared?" Detective Rivera clarified, her pen poised above her notepad. "Yes," Claire confirmed. "Beacon has specialized scent detection training for medical emergencies. He can detect chemical changes in the body that indicate certain medical events, including seizures and other neurological issues." "And you said he specifically alerted to the diaper bag after the child was being treated?" Claire nodded. "He has different alert patterns for different situations. His behavior toward the bag suggests he detected a substance there, not just a medical condition." She paused. "It's as if he recognized the same chemical signature in both the baby and the bottle." Detective Rivera made another note. "Ms. Collins mentioned the baby had a checkup last week. We're investigating who might have had access to the child or her belongings since then." Powell approached with the mall manager, a tightly wound woman in a charcoal suit, who introduced herself as Elaine Chambers. Miss Morgan Chambers began formally, "I want to personally thank you and your service dog for your actions today. Our security team has been directed to review our protocols regarding service animal alerts." She glanced at Powell, who looked appropriately chastened. "We clearly have some training gaps to address." "Beacon was just doing what he's trained to do," Claire replied simply. "The hospital called with an update." Powell added, "The baby is stabilizing. They're running toxicology tests, but the doctor said if she'd gone untreated much longer." He trailed off the implication clear. A young woman who had been shopping nearby stepped forward hesitantly. "I recorded what happened on my phone," she admitted, "not to be weird, but because my brother is applying to service dog programs, and I wanted to show him how they work in public. Would it help the police to have the video? Detective Rivera immediately took the woman's contact information. That could be extremely valuable evidence. Thank you. As the crowd gradually dispersed, an elderly man approached Claire. Young lady, I want you to know I've called the local news. People need to hear about this, not just about the unfortunate situation with the baby, but about the incredible work service dogs like yours perform. Claire felt a flash of anxiety at the thought of media attention, but Beacon immediately pressed against her leg, providing the deep pressure that helped regulate her nervous system. She took a steadying breath, focusing on what mattered most. Lily was receiving treatment, an investigation was underway, and Beacon had done exactly what he was trained to do. The police finished securing the scene. As Claire and Beacon prepared to leave, Officer Powell stopped them at the mall entrance. I owe you both an apology, he said sincerely. 20 years in security, and I've never seen anything like what your dog did today. If we'd followed protocol and asked you to leave, he shook his head. Thank you for standing your ground. Claire had first met Beacon on a rainy Tuesday at the Guardian Service Dogs Training Center in Colorado Fresh, out of intensive therapy, still using a cane for her left leg. She'd been skeptical that a dog could accomplish what medication and counseling hadn't. The training facility, a converted farmhouse outside Denver, smelled of wet dog and coffee when she arrived. Dogs of various breeds worked with trainers in the large fenced yard, golden retrievers practicing retrieval tasks, a standard poodle demonstrating mobility support, and several German shepherds learning guided navigation. Waki Captain Morgan, a woman in her 50s with cropped gray hair and weathered features, approached, extending her hand. I'm Sandra Winters, Director of Training. We're honored to have you in our program. Unlike the enthusiastic greeting Claire expected, Beacon had approached her slowly, methodically when introduced. He sniffed her hands, her legs, her breath. Then he sat directly in front of her, his amber eyes never leaving her face, as if he were memorizing every detail. That's unusual, Sandra had commented, watching the interaction with interest. Beacon is typically more reserved with new clients. Is that a problem? Claire had asked, suddenly worried about being rejected from the program. Not at all, Sandra smiled. In fact, it's promising. The best partnerships form when the dog chooses the handler as much as we choose the match. He's reading you. The breakthrough in their partnership came 3 months into their training. The early days had been challenging. Claire's inconsistent symptoms meant Beacon needed to recognize patterns that even medical devices couldn't always detect. They practiced with scent, samples collected when Claire was experiencing pre-seizure states, anxiety attacks, and normal days training Beacon to differentiate between them. Then one evening, Claire had been having coffee with her neighbor, when Beacon suddenly began his alert pattern, sitting rigidly, giving 3 sharp barks, then pawing the ground. Claire felt fine and assumed it was a training error. Bark. Beacon, settle, she'd commanded. But instead of obeying, Beacon had turned to her neighbor Michael, repeating the alert pattern with increasing urgency. Maybe he needs to go out, Michael had suggested, standing up. He'd taken 2 steps before collapsing to the floor. The paramedics later confirmed he'd experienced a dangerous arrhythmia that could have resulted in cardiac arrest if left untreated. Beacon hadn't been alerting for Claire at all. He detected Michael's heart condition, something Michael himself hadn't even been diagnosed with yet. After that day, Claire's trust in Beacon became absolute. When he alerted, she listened regardless of whether she felt symptoms herself. That history of trust was what gave Claire the confidence to stand her ground at the mall. Beacon had earned her trust through proven reliability, and she would honor their partnership by advocating for his alert no matter how uncomfortable the situation became. As Claire and Beacon walked through the parking lot toward her car, the adrenaline from the incident began to fade, leaving her physically drained but mentally clear. She stopped beside her SUV, kneeling down to bring herself eye level with her partner. You did good, buddy, she whispered, running her hands along Beacon's face and neck. Really good. Beacon's intelligent eyes remained fixed on hers, his expression one of perfect contentment now that his job was complete. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Claire's in the quiet gesture they often shared after difficult moments. Claire thought about how close she had come to doubting Beacon because of social pressure. The stares, the security guards, the mother's initial anger. It would have been easier to apologize and walk away, to assume Beacon was having an off day. The weight of public judgment had almost overridden years of partnership and trust. Yet Beacon had remained absolutely certain, persisting until someone listened. His certainty had saved a child from what the paramedics suggested might have been a deliberate drugging. The thought sent a chill through Claire, despite the warm afternoon sun. As she started the engine, Claire's phone buzzed with a text from her VA counselor. Saw the news alert about a service dog saving a baby at Lakeside Mall. Was that you and Beacon? Call me if you need support after the excitement. News traveled fast. By tomorrow, there would likely be reporters calling, perhaps interview requests. The thought would normally spike her anxiety, but somehow it felt different this time. If telling their story helped people understand the vital work of service dogs, not just as helpers for their handlers, but as protectors of the wider community, maybe the discomfort would be worthwhile. Beacon settled into his specialized seat in the back, his alert posture replaced with relaxed vigilance, always ready but no longer detecting danger. Claire caught his gaze in the rearview mirror and felt a surge of gratitude for this extraordinary animal who had transformed her life and now had saved another. So, trust your dog. It was the first rule they taught in the service dog training, the foundation upon which all other commands were built. Today had proven why that trust wasn't just training dogma, but profound wisdom. Sometimes your partner could perceive things invisible to human senses and human judgment. Sometimes trust was the difference between tragedy and miracle. 2 days later, Claire sat nervously in the waiting area of the local news station. Beacon lay at her feet, perfectly calm, despite the unfamiliar environment of bright lights, cables snaking across the floor, and busy production assistants hurrying past. Ms. Morgan, a young woman with a clipboard, approached. They're ready for you in studio. Claire nodded, standing and smoothing her simple blue blazer, a conscious choice to represent her military background without being overly formal. Come on, Beacon, she said quietly, and the dog rose to heel position. He's so well behaved, the production assistant commented as she led them down a hallway lined with framed photographs of news anchors past and present. After hearing what he did at the mall, I expected something more dramatic. Claire smiled slightly. That's the point of service dogs. They're calm and nearly invisible until the moment they need to take action. The studio was smaller than Claire had imagined, with 3 cameras, several bright lights, and a simple set consisting of 2 armchairs angled toward each other. The morning show host, Angela Chen, rose to greet them. Captain Morgan, thank you so much for joining us, she said warmly, shaking Claire's hand. And this must be the hero of the hour. Please, just Claire is fine, she corrected gently. And yes, this is Beacon. Where would you like him during the interview? Angela asked. We've never had a service dog on set before. He'll lie at my feet, Claire explained. That's his default position when I'm seated. Perfect. Angela nodded. We'll be live in about 3 minutes. Just be yourself. Our viewers want to hear firsthand about what happened at the mall. As they took their positions, Claire felt the familiar tightening in her chest that preceded anxiety. Beacon immediately pressed against her leg, offering comfort without being prompted. She took a deep breath, focusing on his solid presence. You're going to be great, Angela assured her, noticing her nervousness. Just tell your story like you're talking to a friend. The red light on the camera illuminated, and Angela turned to face it with practiced ease. Good morning, Riverdale. I'm Angela Chen, and today we're joined by a remarkable pair whose actions saved a baby's life this weekend at Lakeside Mall. Claire Morgan is an Army veteran and registered nurse, and with her is Beacon, a service dog whose extraordinary abilities detected a medical emergency that human eyes couldn't see. She turned to Claire. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for having us, Claire replied, her voice steadier than she expected. Claire, can you walk us through what happened on Saturday? How did Beacon know something was wrong with baby Lily? Claire recounted the events, describing Beacon's alerting behavior and the resistance she faced before someone finally checked on the baby. As she spoke, she found herself relaxing into the story, the importance of the message overriding her personal discomfort. So he knew something was wrong before any human could tell. Angela asked, her tone conveying appropriate wonder. Yes, Claire confirmed. Service dogs like Beacon have scent capabilities that are almost unimaginable to us. They can detect chemical changes in the body that occur before visible symptoms appear. And I understand there have been developments in the investigation. The baby's mother wasn't responsible for the suspected drugging. Claire nodded. From what Detective Rivera has shared, they believe someone tampered with items in the diaper bag during a previous shopping trip. The mother, Vanessa Collins, was completely unaware. She's been through a terrible ordeal, first nearly losing her daughter and then being suspected of causing it. How is baby Lily doing now? She's recovering well. Claire reported, I visited her at the hospital yesterday. The toxicology reports confirmed she had been exposed to a sedative not approved for pediatric use. If Beacon hadn't alerted when he did, the outcome could have been much worse. Angela turned slightly to address the camera directly. We've learned that police have security footage of a person of interest tampering with Ms. Collins' diaper bag at another store earlier that day. Authorities are asking anyone with information to contact the Riverdale Police Department. Turning back to Claire, Angela's expression softened. Beyond this specific incident, what would you like people to understand about service dogs like Beacon? Claire took a moment to gather her thoughts. Service dogs are extraordinary partners who enhance the lives of people with disabilities in countless ways. But what many people don't realize is that their capabilities extend beyond just helping their handlers. They can perceive things in our environment that humans simply can't detect. She rested her hand on Beacon's head. When you see a service dog alerting, please understand they're communicating something important. Their handlers have spent hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours learning to interpret these signals. Trust that there's a valid reason, even if it isn't immediately obvious to others. That's a powerful message, Angela nodded. Before we end, I understand you have news about Beacon's recognition. Claire smiled. Yes, the mayor will be presenting Beacon with the city's Animal Hero Award next week. It's the first time the award has gone to a service dog rather than a police or search and rescue canine. Well-deserved recognition. Angela beamed. Thank you both for joining us today and for showing us the remarkable difference service dogs can make in our community. Was the red light on the camera turned off? Angela leaned forward. That was perfect, Claire. Your story will help so many people understand the importance of service animals. Claire nodded, feeling a surprising sense of accomplishment. Speaking publicly about her experiences went against every instinct she'd developed since returning from combat. But today it had felt right, necessary even. Captain Morgan, a production assistant, appeared with a phone. There's a call for you from Memorial Children's Hospital. They said it's urgent about Lily Collins. Claire's heart raced as she took the phone, but the news wasn't what she feared. Ms. Morgan, this is Dr. Sharma from Neurology. We've been caring for Lily Collins, and we have a rather unusual request. Would you and your service dog be willing to visit the pediatric neurological unit? We have several patients who might benefit from Beacon's detection abilities. Wait for me. 1 week later, Claire and Beacon entered the bright, colorful lobby of Memorial Children's Hospital's pediatric wing murals of forest animals, decorated the walls in child-sized furniture, created comfortable waiting areas for young patients and their families. Dr. Ananya Sharma, a neurologist specializing in pediatric seizure disorders, greeted them at the reception desk. In her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail and glasses that framed intelligent eyes, Dr. Sharma's presence conveyed both authority and compassion. Thank you for coming, Captain Morgan, she said, shaking Claire's hand. Your dog's abilities have created quite a buzz in our department. Please, just Claire is fine. She corrected a request she found herself making frequently since the news coverage began. And thank you for inviting us. Though I should clarify, Beacon isn't formally trained for pediatric detection. His alerts with Lily were intuitive, for lack of a better word. Dr. Sharma nodded. That's precisely what interests us. Beacon demonstrated an ability to detect neurological distress before conventional monitoring would have caught it. For children with certain seizure disorders, early detection can mean the difference between effective intervention and brain damage. She led them through security doors into the pediatric neurological unit, where the walls were painted with underwater scenes and starfish-shaped lights illuminated the hallway. We have 3 patients in particular we'd like Beacon to meet. Dr. Sharma explained as they walked, children with rare seizure disorders whose episodes don't always present with obvious clinical signs. Our monitoring equipment can miss the onset, especially with absent seizures. I should warn you, Claire said, I can't guarantee Beacon will alert to other children the way he did with Lily. Service dogs typically form their strongest bonds with their handlers. We understand, Dr. Sharma assured her. This is exploratory, but after what happened at the mall, we'd be remiss not to investigate the possibility. They stopped outside a room where a little boy of about 5 was building a tower of blocks while connected to an EEG machine. His mother sat beside him, helping when the tower wobbled. This is Jamie Holloway, Dr. Sharma introduced them. Jamie has Dravet syndrome, a rare form of epilepsy that can cause sudden, severe seizures. His mother, Lisa, has been interested in seizure alert dogs, but the waiting lists are years long. Lisa Holloway rose to greet them, her tired eyes lighting up at the sight of Beacon. Thank you so much for coming, she said. We saw the news story about what your dog did at the mall. It gave us hope. Claire smiled, understanding the desperate need for any tool that might help manage a child's serious medical condition. Beacon is primarily trained for my needs, but he has shown the ability to alert to others in distress. We're happy to see if he can help. With Dr. Sharma's guidance, Claire brought Beacon closer to Jamie, who looked up from his blocks with interest. Doggy, he exclaimed, his face brightening. This is Beacon, Claire explained, keeping her voice gentle. He's a special helper dog. Would you like to meet him? Jamie nodded enthusiastically, and Claire guided Beacon to sit near the boy. You can pet him if you like. He's very gentle. As Jamie tentatively reached out to stroke Beacon's fur, the dog remained perfectly calm, his training evident in every controlled movement. Claire watched carefully for any signs of alerting behavior, but Beacon simply maintained his sitting position, accepting the child's attention with dignified patience. He doesn't seem to be alerting, Claire observed after several minutes. Lisa's face fell slightly, though she quickly covered her disappointment. That's okay, we appreciate you trying. As they prepared to move to the next patient, Dr. Sharma's pager beeped. She checked it, then looked at the EEG monitor beside Jamie's bed. Interesting timing, she murmured, studying the readings. Jamie's not currently showing any pre-seizure activity according to our monitors. Perhaps that's why Beacon isn't alerting. Their next visit was with 12-year-old Sofia Rodriguez, a girl with a rare form of epilepsy that caused seizures difficult to detect without specialized equipment. Unlike Jamie's exuberance, Sofia regarded them with wary curiosity, her dark eyes serious beyond her years. I saw you on TV, she said to Claire as they entered her room. Your dog knew the baby was sick before anyone else did. That's right, Claire confirmed, impressed by the girl's directness. Beacon has a special sense that helps him know when someone needs medical help. Sofia studied Beacon with scientific interest. How does he know? He can smell changes in the body that happen before we can see symptoms. Claire explained, sitting in the chair beside Sofia's bed, while Beacon settled at her feet. It's like having a superpower. He can detect things invisible to humans. Sofia considered this, then looked at Dr. Sharma. Like how the EEG sees my brainwaves before I have a seizure? Very similar, Dr. Sharma nodded. But sometimes even earlier than our machines can detect. As they continued talking, Beacon suddenly lifted his head, ears pricking forward, his attention intensely focused on Sofia. Claire recognized the change immediately, the subtle shift in posture that preceded an alert. Dr. Sharma, she said quietly, Beacon is showing interest in Sofia. The neurologist looked at the EEG monitor, which showed no obvious abnormalities. The readings look normal right now. Beacon rose to his feet, moving closer to Sofia's bed. His behavior wasn't as urgent as it had been with Lily at the mall, but he was clearly detecting something. He gave a single, soft bark, then looked at Claire. That's one of his alert signals. Claire explained, not as urgent as a full alert, but definitely noticing something. Dr. Sharma moved to Sophia's side. Sophia, how are you feeling right now? Any unusual sensations? The girl shrugged, kind of fuzzy maybe, like when I'm really tired after school. The doctor checked Sophia's pulse, then made a notation in her chart. I'm going to increase the sensitivity on your EEG monitoring. Let's see if it picks up what Beacon is noticing. Within minutes, the machine began showing subtle changes, minor fluctuations that would typically be dismissed as normal brain activity variation. There, Dr. Sharma said, pointing to the screen, small spike patterns in the temporal lobe. Not enough to trigger our standard alerts, but definitely abnormal. She looked at Beacon with newfound respect. He detected it before our equipment recognized it as significant. Sophia reached out to touch Beacon's head. Good dog, she said softly. You saw it coming, didn't you? By the end of their visit to the third patient, a toddler whose seizures sometimes went undetected until fully developed, Dr. Sharma was visibly excited by the possibilities. What Beacon demonstrated today confirms what some researchers have been suggesting for years. She explained as they walked back to the lobby. Dogs can detect neurological changes at the molecular level, potentially allowing for earlier intervention than our current monitoring systems. The challenge is training enough dogs with these capabilities. Claire pointed out, service dogs like Beacon require thousands of hours of specialized training, and the demand already far exceeds the supply. That's why we're developing a research proposal. Dr. Sharma revealed a pilot program to study how dogs like Beacon detect pre-seizure states and whether we can identify the specific biomarkers they're responding to. If successful, it could lead to both improved training protocols for detection dogs and better medical monitoring devices modeled on canine olfactory capabilities. She handed Claire a business card. We'd like to include you and Beacon in the study if you're willing. Your military medical background combined with your experience as a service dog handler makes you uniquely qualified to help bridge the gap between the medical and service animal communities. Claire looked down at Beacon, who sat patiently at her side, unaware of the potential impact his extraordinary abilities might have on countless children's lives. The dog who had given her back her independence after trauma might now help extend that same gift to others facing their own medical challenges. We'd be honored to participate, she said, pocketing the card. Beacon has already changed my life. If he can help others too, that feels like completing the circle. Nano is so one. 3 months later, Claire stood at the back of a conference room at Riverdale Memorial Hospital, watching as Dr. Sharma presented the preliminary findings of their research project to the hospital board and several representatives from national medical organizations. Beacon lay at her feet, a blue bandana with the project logo, a dog silhouette inside a brain scan, outline tied around his neck for the occasion. On the screen at the front of the room, a slide displayed graphs comparing standard EEG detection times with canine alerting behavior. As you can see from these preliminary results, Dr. Sharma explained, pointing to the significant gap between the data points. The trained service dogs in our study consistently detected pre-seizure states an average of 4-3 minutes before our most sensitive monitoring equipment registered abnormal activity. Syrian 1, Tirale. She advanced to the next slide, showing a chemical analysis. Using mass spectrometry, we've identified several volatile organic compounds present in exhaled breath during the pre-seizure state. These compounds appear to be what the dogs are detecting, biomarkers that current medical technology isn't designed to monitor. A board member raised his hand. Dr. Sharma, while these results are impressive, how practical is this approach? We can't place a service dog with every epilepsy patient. You're absolutely right. Dr. Sharma nodded. And that's not our goal. Rather, we're using the dog's extraordinary detection abilities as a model for developing the next generation of seizure monitoring devices. By understanding exactly what compounds they're detecting, we can create sensors specifically calibrated to those biomarkers. She gestured toward Claire and Beacon. Meanwhile, dogs like Beacon demonstrate that even service animals trained for other primary purposes can contribute to broader medical detection when properly supported. This suggests potential for existing service dogs to receive supplemental training in specific medical alerting once their primary training is complete. True. After the presentation, as hospital staff and visitors mingled during the reception, Claire found herself approached by a familiar face. Vanessa Collins with Lily balanced on her hip. At 9 months old, the baby looked healthy and alert, her chubby cheeks pink with health, showing no signs of her earlier ordeal. "I hoped you'd be here," Vanessa said, shifting Lily to her other hip. "We've been following the project updates in the newsletter." "How is she doing?" Claire asked, smiling at the baby, who regarded her with curious eyes. "Perfectly healthy," Vanessa beamed. "The neurologist found no lasting effects from the sedative. She's meeting all her developmental milestones right on schedule." Lily pointed at Beacon, babbling excitedly. "She wants to see the doggy." Vanessa laughed. "Is it okay?" Claire nodded, guiding Beacon to sit. Beacon gentle. She commanded, though the instruction was hardly necessary. The dog automatically adjusted his demeanor when approaching children. As Vanessa knelt to let Lily see Beacon up close, the baby reached out with chubby fingers to touch his fur, giggling with delight when he gave her hand a gentle lick. "I never properly thanked you," Vanessa said, looking up at Claire. "After everything happened with the police investigation and the hospital stay, I never got to tell you what your insistence meant." "You don't need to thank me," Claire assured her. "Beacon did what he's trained to do." "No," Vanessa shook her head. "You stood your ground when everyone, including me, was telling you to leave. That took courage." She hesitated. "They caught him, you know. My ex-boyfriend. The security footage showed him tampering with the diaper bag when I was in a fitting room at another store. He admitted to replacing the baby acetaminophen with a liquid sedative. Chudi, H. Claire's stomach tightened at the confirmation of what they had all suspected. "I'm so sorry you went through that." "The police said," Vanessa's voice wavered slightly. "They said if the sedative had fully taken effect, Lily might not have woken up at all. Your dog literally saved her life." Lily, oblivious to the gravity of the conversation, continued patting Beacon's head with delighted fascination. "Have you considered getting a service dog for home?" Claire asked. "There are organizations that train dogs specifically for family protection." Vanessa smiled. "Actually, I've been approved for the pilot program. We're being matched with a dog next month, not for medical alerting, but for security. He'll be trained to recognize potential threats and unauthorized people approaching Lily." "That's wonderful," Claire said sincerely. "The right dog can transform your sense of security. Beacon did that for me, but in a different way." As they talked, Dr. Sharma approached with a distinguished older gentleman in a tailored suit. "Claire, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Howard Mercer from the National Institutes of Health. He's interested in expanding our research to include PTSD detection applications." The conversation that followed opened yet another unexpected door. A potential role for Claire as a consultant on a nationwide study examining how service dogs like Beacon might help not just their handlers, but entire communities through their extraordinary sensory capabilities. That evening, Claire sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange, and purple Beacon lay beside her chair, his day's work complete, relaxing in the cool evening air. Her phone chimed with a text message from her brother Ryan, not her biological brother lost in combat, but her battle brother from her deployment who had become family during their shared trauma and recovery. "Saw the news about the hospital research project. Proud of you, Morgan. You've come a long way from hiding in your apartment. Beacon deserves an extra treat. So do you?" Claire smiled, setting the phone aside and reaching down to scratch behind Beacon's ears. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes half closed in contentment. 3 years ago, she could barely function in civilian life. The crowded mall where they had saved Lily would have been an impossible environment, triggering panic attacks so severe she would have needed emergency intervention. Now she not only navigated such spaces, but had found a way to use her military medical training and her partnership with Beacon to help others. Trust your dog. The mantra from service dog training had taken on new meaning. It wasn't just about trusting Beacon's alerts for her own medical needs, but about trusting his extraordinary perceptions, even when they contradicted human judgment or convenience. The Belgian Malinois shifted slightly, resting his head on her foot, a gesture of connection he often made when they were alone. The professional service dog momentarily becoming simply her companion and friend. In the fading light, Claire thought about the paths that had brought them together: her military service and traumatic injury, Beacon's rejection from the military working dog program for being too gentle, and the training center that recognized their potential match. So many coincidences and choices that had culminated in that moment at the mall when a dog's persistent barking had saved a baby's life. And now their partnership had expanded beyond her personal needs to a role neither could have fulfilled alone: Claire's medical knowledge and Beacon's sensory capabilities, combining to create possibilities for children like Sophia and Jamie, whose seizures might one day be detected earlier because of what they were learning from Beacon's abilities. "Good boy," Claire murmured, and Beacon's tail thumped gently against the balcony floor. The simple acknowledgement all he needed to know: that he had done his job well, that his trust had been honored, and that together they had made a difference. The extraordinary dog with the sixth sense and the wounded warrior who had learned to trust in partners in healing for themselves and now for others. As darkness settled over the city, Claire felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible to reclaim. After her trauma, Beacon had given her back not just independence, but purpose. A gift she was now helping extend to others who needed the same extraordinary connection with a being who could sense what humans could not. 6 months later, winter had descended upon Riverdale, transforming the landscape into a canvas of white street lamps. Along the hospital entrance glowed softly against the early evening darkness, illuminating gently falling snowflakes inside Memorial Children's Hospital's rehabilitation wing. Claire watched as Beacon worked with 12-year-old Sophia Rodriguez, now a regular participant in their research program. The once clinical environment had been transformed into what the staff fondly called the Beacon Protocol Room. Colorful wall murals depicted dogs helping children, comfortable furniture replaced standard hospital chairs, and specialized equipment discreetly monitored both canine behavior and patient biometrics. What had begun as an exploratory project had evolved into a formal clinical trial, attracting attention from medical institutions across the country. "Okay, Sophia," Claire guided, watching as the girl practiced with a specially designed hand signal. "Remember to keep your movement consistent so Beacon understands exactly what you need. Terminayun." Sophia nodded, concentrating intensely. As she made the gesture, they developed a closed fist pressed against her sternum, then opened with fingers splayed outward. The signal was unique to her, developed through weeks of careful training to help her communicate with seizure response dogs. Beacon watched attentively, then responded precisely as trained, moving to Sophia's side and applying gentle pressure against her leg, the response that would alert her to a potential oncoming seizure. "Perfect," Claire praised them both. "Your consistency is really improving, Sophia." Dr. Sharma entered, tablet in hand, smiling at the successful interaction. Over the months, the neurologist had become not just a colleague, but a friend, her initial scientific interest evolving into genuine passion for the emerging field of medical detection dogs. The EEG readings from yesterday's session just finished processing. She announced the correlation between Beacon's alerts and the pre-seizure biomarkers is holding at 92% accuracy. That's better than any automated detection system currently available. Sophia beamed with pride, reaching down to stroke Beacon's head. "He's the best, way better than machines." The relationship between Sophia and Beacon had become one of the unexpected success stories of the program. Though the dog remained Claire's service animal, his ability to detect Sophia's seizures approximately 5 minutes before conventional monitoring equipment had dramatically improved her quality of life during her hospital stays. The NIH representatives were impressed with the protocols we've developed. Dr. Sharma continued after Sophia's mother arrived to take her to another appointment. They're considering expanding funding to include a dedicated breeding and training program for medical detection dogs. Claire nodded, watching Beacon return to her side, his work session complete. That's incredible progress in just 6 months. I never imagined we'd move this quickly. Your military medical background combined with your personal experience has been invaluable. Dr. Sharma replied, "You bridge worlds that rarely communicate effectively. Medical professionals service, dog trainers and patients." Claire smiled, still unused to praise despite the growing recognition of her contribution. "It's Beacon doing the real work. I'm just the translator." They walked together through the pediatric ward, where Beacon had become something of a celebrity. Young patients waved from their rooms and nurses greeted the dog by name. The hospital administration had initially been skeptical about allowing a service dog regular access to clinical areas, but Beacon's impeccable behavior and demonstrated medical value had converted even the most hesitant staff members. Speaking of translation, Dr. Sharma said, "The journal article is being published next week. Canine olfactory detection of pre-seizure states developing protocols for clinical integration. Your name as co-author is going to bring attention to the field." Claire felt a flutter of anxiety at the thought of such public exposure. Despite months of interviews and presentations, she still found publicity challenging. Beacon, sensing the subtle change in her biochemistry, pressed gently against her leg without being prompted, his way of providing grounding pressure to prevent anxiety from escalating. "Thank you, buddy," Claire murmured, drawing strength from his reliable support. To Dr. Sharma, she added, "I hope it helps create more opportunities for service dog partnerships." The waiting lists are still years long for most programs. As they reached Dr. Sharma's office, they found an unexpected visitor waiting, Detective Sofia Rivera, who had investigated the case of Lily's drugging. The detective rose from her chair as they entered, extending her hand. "Ms. Morgan, good to see you again," she greeted Claire. "I'm Beacon, of course." The detective had developed a soft spot for the Belgian Malinois during the investigation, often bringing special treats when she came to take statements. "Detective Rivera," Claire replied, surprised. "What brings you to the hospital?" Rivera's expression remained professional, but there was a hint of good news in her eyes. "I wanted to update you personally. Michael Collins was sentenced this morning 8 years for the attempted poisoning of his ex-girlfriend's child, plus additional time for violating the restraining order." Claire felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Though she had tried to focus on the positive outcomes of that day at the mall, the knowledge that someone had deliberately endangered a baby had lingered in her thoughts. "Now, that's good to hear," she said quietly. "How are Vanessa and Lily doing?" "Auntie." "Thriving," Rivera replied with a genuine smile. "Lily just celebrated her first birthday. They moved to Colorado to be closer to Vanessa's parents, and they got their protection dog, a German Shepherd named Valor. Vanessa sends updates to the department occasionally." The detective hesitated, then continued. "There's another reason for my visit. The department is establishing a K9 medical detection unit, inspired partly by what happened with Beacon. We're looking for a consultant to help develop training protocols. Dr. Sharma suggested you might be interested or..." Claire blinked in surprise. "Me, I don't have law enforcement experience, but you understand both the medical aspects and the handler-dog relationship better than anyone we've found." Rivera countered, "It would be part-time working alongside our K9 trainers. The focus would be developing dogs that can detect specific medical emergencies in the field." The offer was unexpected but intriguing. Claire looked down at Beacon, who watched her with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to understand far more than any dog should have. "I'd like to hear more details," she said finally. "It sounds like important work." As Detective Rivera outlined the proposed program, Claire found herself marveling at how far she had come. A year ago, the thought of working with a police department would have triggered intense anxiety. Now it felt like a natural extension of the path she and Beacon had forged together. After the detective left promising to send formal documentation about the position, Claire sat in Dr. Sharma's office processing the opportunity. "You should take it," the neurologist encouraged. "Your work here has already established the foundation. This would be applying those principles in another vital setting." So whatever. Claire nodded slowly. "It's just sometimes I still feel like the broken soldier who couldn't function in public without having panic attacks. The idea that I could be teaching others seems surreal." Dr. Sharma's expression softened with understanding. "That's precisely why you're perfect for this role. You've lived the journey from trauma to healing with a service dog. You understand both the medical science and the deeply personal experience of recovery." Before Claire could respond, a knock on the door interrupted them. A nurse appeared looking slightly flustered. "Dr. Sharma, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation in the ER. 9-year-old boy suspected seizure disorder, but no previous diagnosis. He's extremely agitated and the standard protocols aren't working." Dr. McKinley thought, well, he wondered if Beacon might help. On Mashiram, Claire exchanged glances with Dr. Sharma, who nodded encouragingly. "We'll be right there." The emergency department was organized chaos medical personnel, moving with practiced efficiency amid the steady beep of monitors and hum of equipment. In a curtained area near the back, a young boy thrashed against restraints, while a desperate-looking couple stood nearby, the woman sobbing quietly into her hands. Dr. Jason McKinley, a resident who had participated in several of their research sessions, hurried over when he spotted Claire and Beacon. "Thank you for coming," he said, his relief evident. Tyler Peterson, 9 years old, brought in after a behavioral episode at school. Parents report increasing aggression and confusion over the past month, but no diagnosed condition. "We're concerned about non-convulsive status epilepticus, but he won't stay still for proper monitoring and becomes combative when approached." Omarnan. Claire nodded immediately, understanding the challenge. Non-convulsive seizures could present as behavioral changes rather than the typical muscle contractions people associated with epilepsy, making them difficult to diagnose, particularly in children. "Has he had any imaging done?" she asked, automatically shifting into her medical training. "Tried," he became too agitated. "We're preparing for sedation, but his reactions have been unusual, and we're concerned about underlying complications." Claire studied the situation, then made a decision. "Let me try with Beacon first. He's been able to detect subtle seizure activity in children who appear normal to standard observation." Dr. McKinley nodded gratefully. "At this point, we're open to anything that might help." Claire approached the parents, introducing herself and explaining Beacon's capabilities in simple terms. "He can sometimes detect neurological activity that's not immediately obvious to medical equipment. Would you be comfortable letting him approach your son?" The father, a tall man with worry etched deeply into his face, looked skeptical but desperate. "Will it hurt him?" "Not at all. Beacon is specially trained to work with children. He'll just observe Tyler and possibly alert us if he detects something significant." After receiving their permission, Claire prepared Beacon with a quiet command. Beacon gentle medical work. The Belgian Malinois immediately shifted into his specialized detection mode alert, but supremely calm his movements, becoming slow and deliberate. Claire guided him toward the curtained area where Tyler continued to struggle against the restraints, his eyes unfocused, mumbling words that made no sense. "Tyler." Claire spoke gently, staying at a non-threatening distance. "My name is Claire, and this is my friend Beacon. He's a special dog who helps people at the hospital. Would it be okay if he says hello?" The boy's movements paused briefly as his attention caught on the dog, a reaction that the medical team noted with interest. Claire used this momentary calm to move slightly closer, allowing Beacon to position himself where he could properly assess the child. What happened next astonished even Claire, who had witnessed Beacon's extraordinary abilities many times. The dog approached the bed with extreme caution, sniffed the air around Tyler, then immediately dropped into his most urgent alert posture, sitting rigidly, giving 3 sharp barks and pawing at the floor. He's detecting something significant, Claire reported to Dr. McKinley. This is his highest level alert, the same pattern he used with Lily Collins at the mall. Dr. McKinley called for immediate preparation of the EEG equipment. Let's get a reading while he's relatively calm. Beacon maintained his alert, moving slightly closer to Tyler. Remarkably, the boy's thrashing subsided as he focused on the dog, allowing the medical team to attach monitoring equipment with minimal resistance. Look at these readings, the EEG technician called out within minutes. Continuous spike and wave patterns throughout the left temporal lobe. Definitely seizure activity, but not presenting, typically EP. Status epilepticus. Dr. McKinley confirmed, no wonder he's been having behavioral changes. His brain has essentially been seizing for who knows how long. The proper diagnosis led to immediate treatment with anti-seizure medication, administered through Tyler's IV. Within 20 minutes, the EEG readings began to normalize, and the boy's agitation visibly decreased. Claire remained with Beacon near Tyler's bedside, the dog's calming presence seeming to help the child stay focused as the medication took effect. When Tyler finally spoke clearly, for the first time since arriving at the hospital, his first words were directed at Beacon. "Good dog," he murmured, his hand reaching out tentatively. "You're a good dog." Claire guided Beacon closer so Tyler could touch him, watching as the simple connection seemed to provide comfort to the exhausted child. Dr. McKinley approached, genuine amazement on his face. "We would have eventually reached the right diagnosis, but it might have taken hours more with additional suffering. For Tyler, Beacon got us there in minutes." Hours later, with Tyler stabilized and resting comfortably under proper medication, Claire and Beacon finally headed home. The winter night had deepened, temperature dropping, as they walked through the hospital parking lot to her car. "You were exceptional today," Claire told Beacon as she opened the car door for him. "Even by your standards." The Belgian Malinois looked at her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold such understanding, then hopped into his specialized seat. As Claire drove through the quiet streets, she reflected on the day's events. The journal publication, the job offer from the police department, and now Beacon's remarkable intervention with Tyler. The radio played softly in the background, a local news station reporting on the day's events. Claire was about to change the station when a familiar story caught her attention. In health news, Memorial Children's Hospital announced a breakthrough in the early detection of seizure disorders today. The Canine Medical Detection Program, pioneered by Army veteran Claire Morgan and her service dog Beacon, has demonstrated unprecedented success in identifying neurological events before standard medical equipment can detect them. Dr. Ananya Sharma, head of pediatric neurology, called the program a revolutionary bridge between animal intuition and medical science. The NIH has approved major funding to expand. Claire turned off the radio, a complex mix of emotions washing over her, pride in what they had accomplished, lingering discomfort with public recognition, and beneath it all, a sense of purpose stronger than anything she'd felt since before the mortar attack that had ended her military career. The apartment was dark when they arrived, but Claire didn't mind. After the sensory overload of the hospital, the quiet darkness felt comforting. She moved through her evening routine with Beacon removing his service vest, the signal that he was officially off duty, feeding him, taking him for a quick bathroom break, and finally settling on the couch together. As she absently stroked Beacon's fur, her phone chimed with a text message from her younger sister Rachel. "Just saw your program on the news. Mom's telling everyone at her book club her daughter's a medical pioneer. Might have cried a little myself, so proud of you, sis. Who would have thought that when you came home 3 years ago, barely able to leave your apartment, you'd be changing medicine. Love you tons. P.S. Extra treats for Beacon." Claire smiled, remembering those dark days after her medical discharge. The panic attacks that came without warning, the nightmares that left her drenched in sweat, the hypervigilance that transformed ordinary public spaces into minefields of potential triggers. The changes had been so gradual that sometimes she forgot to acknowledge her progress. From barely functioning to helping establish a groundbreaking medical program, from isolated and withdrawn to teaching others about the healing partnership between humans and dogs. Beacon shifted, placing his head on her lap, in a gesture that always seemed to coincide with her moments of deepest reflection, as if he could sense not just her physical distress, but her emotional journeys as well. "You changed everything," she told him quietly, running her fingers through the soft fur behind his ears. "Not just for me, but for children like Sophia and Tyler, for babies like Lily, even for the medical community that's finally recognizing what dogs like you can do." Beacon's tail thumped gently against the couch cushion, his amber eyes fixed on her face with that mixture of devotion and understanding that transcended ordinary animal-human connections. Claire's phone rang, interrupting the peaceful moment. The caller ID showed Dr. Sharma's number, unusual for this time of evening. "Claire, I hope I'm not calling too late," the neurologist began without preamble. "I just received a call from Massachusetts General Hospital. They've reviewed our preliminary data and want to establish a similar program immediately. They're asking if you and Beacon would be willing to come to Boston for 2 weeks to help train their initial team." The request represented another unexpected expansion of their work from local hospital to police department to National Medical Center. "When would they need us?" Claire asked, her mind already calculating the logistics. "Next month, they'd cover all expenses, of course. And Claire, they specifically asked for you, not just any handler. Your combination of medical training and service dog experience is unique." Iwam. After promising to consider the offer and discuss details the next day, Claire ended the call. Her thoughts spinning with possibilities. Boston in winter would be challenging. New environments still triggered her anxiety, sometimes, though far less severely than before Beacon. But the opportunity to establish their protocols in one of the nation's premier hospitals was significant. She looked down at Beacon, who had remained attentive throughout the conversation. "What do you think, partner? Are we ready for Boston?" The Belgian Malinois tilted his head slightly, ears perked forward in that expression that always made Claire smile despite herself. "You're right," she said, as if he had actually answered. "We can handle it together." Fuquin, we're in 1 month later, Claire stood in front of an audience of medical professionals at Massachusetts General Hospital Beacon, sitting perfectly at her side as she presented the training protocols they had developed. The grand medical auditorium, with its rich history and imposing architecture, had initially triggered her anxiety, but Beacon's steady presence and preemptive pressure therapy had helped her maintain her composure. "The key distinction in our approach," she explained, indicating a slide showing comparative data, "is that we're not just training dogs to alert to specific conditions. We're developing a methodology for handlers to interpret and validate what the dogs are naturally detecting." In the front row, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, head of neurology at MGH, nodded appreciatively. Over the past week, she had become one of their strongest advocates, particularly after witnessing Beacon detect a subclinical seizure during a demonstration. "Questions before we move to the practical demonstration?" Claire asked, surveying the room. A neurology resident raised his hand. "The data shows impressive detection rates for neurological events. But what about other medical conditions? Could these protocols be adapted for, say, detecting dangerously low blood sugar or cardiac abnormalities?" "Excellent question," Claire replied. "The underlying principle remains consistent across different medical conditions. Dogs like Beacon are detecting biochemical changes that occur before visible symptoms appear. These changes create unique olfactory signatures that properly trained dogs can identify with remarkable precision." She gestured to Beacon, who remained attentive at her side. "The specific training varies based on the target condition, but the foundation is the same, teaching handlers to recognize and trust their dog's alerts, even when conventional medical indicators haven't yet registered a problem." After several more questions, Claire transitioned to the practical demonstration. 3 patients had volunteered to participate: a teenager with epilepsy, an older man with a cardiac condition, and a young woman with diabetes. None were currently showing symptoms detectable by standard monitoring. "Zuber, Beacon medical work," Claire commanded, and the dog immediately shifted into his detection mode. The audience watched in fascinated silence as Beacon approached each patient, methodically assessing them with that extraordinary olfactory capability that could detect chemical changes at the molecular level. When he reached the young woman with diabetes, he immediately gave his alert signal, sitting, barking once, and looking back at Claire. Beacon is alerting to Alexandra. Claire explained based on his specific behavior, he's detecting a significant blood glucose change. A nurse quickly checked Alexandra's levels with a traditional meter, 93 mg DL. She reported that's within normal range. Beacon isn't alerting to her current level, but to where it's trending. Claire explained, I'd recommend checking again in 15 minutes. Sure enough, when tested again shortly later, Alexandra's blood glucose had dropped to 68 mg DL and was continuing to fall rapidly, a dangerous trend that would have led to hypoglycemic symptoms if left unchecked. Intervention with glucose tablets prevented any medical emergency. The demonstration continued with similar results for the other participants. By the end of the session, even the most skeptical physicians were showing genuine interest in the program's potential applications. As the audience dispersed, Dr. Chen approached Claire with unmistakable enthusiasm. This exceeds our expectations. The hospital board has unanimously approved establishing a permanent canine medical detection unit based on your protocols. Claire smiled, acknowledging the accomplishment, while bending to offer Beacon a well-deserved treat from her pocket. He makes it look easy, but it represents hundreds of hours of training and partnership. That's precisely why your involvement is so valuable. Dr. Chen continued, we can train dogs based on established methods, but the handler-dog relationship you demonstrate with Beacon is something special. We'd like you to consider a more permanent role as a program consultant. The offer caught Claire by surprise. I'm flattered, but my primary commitments are in Riverdale. The hospital program, there and now the police department and consultancy. If we understand, Dr. Chen nodded. We're thinking quarterly visits plus online consulting. MGH would establish your protocols as the standard, with you guiding implementation across multiple hospitals. It was a remarkable opportunity, the chance to expand their work nationally to help establish medical detection dogs as a recognized component of healthcare. Claire promised to consider the offer seriously and discuss it with her team back home. Later that evening, Claire walked with Beacon through Boston Common, the historic park dusted with fresh snow that glittered under the street lamps. The cold air was invigorating after a day spent in the hospital's climate-controlled environment, and Beacon moved with obvious enjoyment through the winter landscape. Claire's phone vibrated with an incoming call. Rachel again checking in on her Boston adventure. How's it going, pioneer woman? Her sister teased after Claire answered. Better than expected, Claire admitted, watching Beacon investigate a particularly interesting snowdrift. MGH wants to implement the program permanently. That's amazing, Mom's going to burst with pride. She's already showing your journal article to everyone she meets, pretending she understands the medical terminology. Claire laughed, picturing their mother's enthusiastic oversharing. How are things back home? Good. Oh, I meant to tell you that new Veterans Support Center you mentioned. They called the house looking for you. Something about wanting you to speak at their opening next month. I told them you'd be back from Boston soon. The Veterans Center had been under development for nearly a year. A dedicated facility for returning service members that combined medical services, counseling, and community support. Claire had donated to their fundraising campaign, but hadn't expected to be contacted directly. Did they say why they wanted me specifically? She asked, guiding Beacon back to the path as other park visitors approached. Something about your story being inspiring to veterans struggling with PTSD and reintegration. The guy mentioned you're exactly the kind of success story they want to highlight. Military to civilian transition done right. Claire felt the familiar discomfort with being labeled inspirational. Her journey with Beacon had been filled with setbacks, difficult days, and ongoing challenges. The public only saw the end result, not the painful process. I'll think about it, she said non-committally. Speaking to groups still isn't my favorite thing. Consider it, Rachel encouraged. Think about what it would have meant to you 3 years ago to hear from someone who'd made it through to the other side. After ending the call, Claire continued their walk, Rachel's words echoing in her mind. What would it have meant to her in those darkest days after her discharge to see someone who had navigated the same treacherous waters and found shore? Beacon suddenly stopped his attention, caught by a man sitting alone on a bench despite the cold. Something in the dog's posture alerted Claire, not his full medical alert, but the subtle shift that indicated he'd detected something concerning. The man was middle-aged, dressed in a heavy coat with military-style boots, his posture rigid and eyes fixed on the middle distance. A 1,000-yard stare Claire recognized immediately from her own experience. A veteran, almost certainly, and one in distress. In the past, Claire might have walked by respecting the unspoken code among veterans to allow each other space, unless assistance was explicitly requested. But Beacon had made his assessment, and she had learned to trust his judgment. "Excuse me," she said quietly, approaching, but maintaining a respectful distance. "My service dog seems concerned about you. Are you all right?" The man's focus returned slowly, his eyes landing first on Beacon, then moving to Claire. "Service dog?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse or emotion. "Yes, sir, this is Beacon. I'm Claire. He's trained to detect certain medical conditions and sometimes emotional distress." The man almost smiled. "Smart dog, good at his job." He hesitated, then gestured to the empty space beside him on the bench. "Mind sitting a minute? Been a while since I talked to anyone who'd understand." Claire sat, allowing Beacon to position himself between them, close enough to provide support to both, but maintaining the proper working distance. "Afghanistan or Iraq?" the man asked after a moment. "Both last deployment was Iraq near Mosul, Afghanistan, Kandahar province, 3 tours." He extended his hand. "James Caldwell, former Army Ranger. Claire Morgan, Army Nurse Corps." A look of recognition passed between them, the unspoken understanding shared by those who had seen the same darkness. "How long you been back?" James asked, his gaze returning to the middle distance. 3 years. It was rough at first." James nodded. "Been 5 years for me. Still rough some days. Like today, anniversary of when we lost half our unit to an IED. Days like this, the memories get loud." Claire understood completely. She had her own calendar of difficult days. Her brother's death date, the anniversary of the mortar attack, certain holidays that carried specific traumatic associations. "Beacon helps with that," she said. "He can sense when the memories are taking over, intervenes before I get lost in them." James studied the Belgian Malinois with newfound interest. "How'd you get him?" "VA has a 3-year waiting list for service dogs." "Dury? I got lucky." Claire admitted a specialized program had an opening because Beacon wasn't right for his original assignment. He was too gentle for military working dog duties. "There, loss your gain," James observed. After a moment, he added, "Been thinking about applying, but the wait seemed impossible. Meanwhile, I'm barely holding on to my job because of panic attacks." The conversation flowed more easily than Claire would have expected with a stranger. There was something about the shared experience of combative trauma, of struggling to reintegrate into civilian life, that created an immediate connection. She found herself telling James about the Veteran Service Dog Initiative, a new program connected to the research work at Memorial, specifically focused on pairing veterans with medical alert and PTSD service dogs through an accelerated training protocol she had helped develop. "They're looking for participants for the pilot program." She explained, "Veterans with documented PTSD or TBI who meet certain criteria. The training is intensive, 3 months of working directly with the dogs, but the waiting period is reduced to 6 months instead of years." James's interest was evident, though tempered with the cautious hope of someone who had learned not to expect too much. "You really think a dog would help with all this?" He gestured vaguely to his head, indicating the invisible wounds he carried. Claire looked at Beacon, who had maintained his supportive position throughout their conversation, occasionally checking her stress levels with a glance. "I went from barely leaving my apartment to helping establish medical programs in multiple states. I still have bad days, I still have triggers, but Beacon makes it manageable instead of overwhelming." She pulled out her phone, finding the contact information for the program coordinator. "May I?" she asked, and when James nodded, she sent a quick text message introducing James and requesting application materials. "No guarantees," she cautioned. But I'll put in a good word, Beacon, and I help with some of the training assessments. By the time they parted ways an hour later, James looked marginally less burdened. He had a concrete next step, an application process to focus on, and perhaps most importantly, had connected with someone who understood his experience without judgment. Walking back to her hotel, Claire realized that the conversation had shifted something within her as well. For years, she had focused on what Beacon had done for her personally then, on their work with children like Sophia and Tyler. But there was another dimension to their partnership, the potential to help other veterans find their own path back from trauma through similar connections. Rachel's words about the Veterans Center invitation took on new meaning. Perhaps sharing her story despite the discomfort it caused wasn't about being labeled inspirational. Perhaps it was simply about showing others that there was a path forward, however difficult. The Riverdale Veterans Support Center opening ceremony was held on a crisp March afternoon. The newly renovated building, once an abandoned community center, now featured state-of-the-art medical facilities, counseling offices, communal spaces, and a specially designed service dog training area in the adjacent field. Claire stood at the podium, Beacon, sitting perfectly at her side as she addressed the gathered crowd of veterans community members and officials. Public speaking still triggered her anxiety, but it had become manageable with practice and Beacon's steady presence. 3 years ago, she began, "I was medically discharged after 8 years of service. I returned home with physical injuries that would heal and invisible wounds that I feared would not. The journey from there to here wasn't straightforward or easy. There were days I couldn't leave my apartment. Nights I couldn't sleep, moments I questioned whether civilian life was possible for me at all." She paused, allowing herself to make eye contact with several veterans in the front rows, including James Caldwell, who had been accepted into the service dog program and traveled from Boston for the ceremony. What changed wasn't that the trauma disappeared or that the triggers vanished. What changed was that I found a partner who could navigate those challenges with me. She looked down at Beacon. Service dogs like Beacon don't just assist with physical tasks or provide emotional support. They create a bridge back to the world when that connection seems impossible to rebuild alone. As she continued describing the transformation from isolation to community, from limitation to possibility, Claire noticed several veterans nodding in recognition. Their expressions reflected what she had felt listening to other stories during her own recovery. That powerful realization that you weren't alone, that others had walked the same difficult path and found their way forward. This center represents something essential for returning service members, a community that understands both the visible and invisible costs of service. A place where your experience doesn't need to be explained or justified. A resource for rebuilding civilian life without denying or minimizing military experience. After the ceremony, as attendees explored the new facility, Dr. Sharma approached Claire with a woman Claire didn't recognize, middle-aged, with short-cropped silver hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to command. "Claire, I'd like you to meet Colonel Patricia Harrington, Director of the Military Medical Research Division. She came specifically to see our program in action." Colonel Harrington shook Claire's hand firmly. "Captain Morgan, your work with medical detection dogs has caught the attention of several departments within the DoD, particularly your success integrating service dog capabilities with conventional medical monitoring." "Thank you, ma'am," Claire replied automatically, the military courtesy returning naturally. "It's been a team effort with Dr. Sharma and the hospital staff." "Indeed, but your unique background bridging military medical training with civilian service dog development is what interests us most." The colonel surveyed the center with an appraising eye. "We're exploring applications for forward operating bases, dogs trained to detect early signs of traumatic brain injury, post-concussive syndrome, and combat stress reactions before they become debilitating." The potential applications were immediately clear to Claire. How many soldiers could return to duty safely if early intervention were possible? How many might avoid the long-term consequences she and countless others had experienced? "The program is still in its early stages," Colonel Harrington continued, "but we'd like to bring you on as a consultant. Your protocols could save lives and preserve military readiness simultaneously." As Claire discussed the possibility, she caught sight of James across the room, now deep in conversation with one of the service dog trainers. He was smiling, perhaps the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, as he knelt to interact with a young German shepherd, being considered as his future partner. The image crystallized something Claire had been feeling throughout the day, a sense of coming full circle. From wounded warrior to wellness advocate, from service member to civilian expert, now returning to serve those still in uniform, from recipient of help to provider of help for others on the same journey. Later that evening, as Claire and Beacon walked through the quiet streets of Riverdale, she reflected on the extraordinary path they had traveled together. From the mall where Beacon had first alerted to baby Lily, to hospital programs in multiple states, to potential military applications that might prevent injuries like hers. Each step had seemed impossible until they took it together. The Belgian Malinois trotted contentedly beside her, his service vest removed for their evening walk, just a dog enjoying time with his person. Yet Claire knew that beneath his ordinary canine appearance lay extraordinary capabilities, the ability to detect molecular changes imperceptible to humans, the intuitive understanding of emotional states, the uncanny knack for knowing precisely when to intervene. Her phone chimed with a message from Vanessa Collins, something that happened every few weeks now. Lily took her first steps today, sending you and Beacon all our love. She wouldn't be here without you both. Attached was a video of a beaming Lily toddling uncertainly across a living room, while Valor, their protection dog, watched attentively from nearby. Claire smiled, showing the screen to Beacon, who studied it with that focused attention he gave to everything she shared with him. See that, buddy? That's because of you, because you barked when everyone wanted you to be quiet, because you insisted when everyone thought you were wrong. The simple lesson at the heart of their journey together. Trust your dog. Trust that connection that transcends words and conventional understanding. Trust the silent communication between species that can detect what technology misses, perceive what humans overlook, and create bridges where none seem possible. As they turned toward home, Claire felt a peace that had once seemed permanently beyond her reach. The trauma remained part of her story. The scars, both physical and emotional, would always be there, but they no longer defined her existence or limited her possibilities. Beacon had shown her a different way forward, not by erasing the past, but by making the present navigable and the future open with potential, one alert. One intervention, one day at a time. The extraordinary dog with the sixth sense and the wounded warrior who had learned to trust him, partners in healing for themselves and now for others. As darkness settled over the city, Claire felt a sense of peace and purpose that had once seemed impossible to reclaim. After her trauma, Beacon had given her back not just independence, but meaning a gift she was now helping extend to others who needed the same extraordinary connection with a being who could sense what humans could not. Have you ever witnessed a moment when an animal sensed something humans completely missed? What do you think gives some animals this extraordinary ability to detect medical emergencies before visible symptoms appear? Would you have trusted a service dog's alert about a stranger's baby, even if it meant potentially embarrassing yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of heroic service animals. Press the bell icon to be notified when we upload new videos every week. Share this video with friends and family who appreciate the extraordinary bond between humans and their service animals.